G'day, it's Rob from the Global Society, and I'm here at Sydney Airport today. I'm actually heading to the USA, and I thought, what a perfect time to talk about one of the most important topics that you need to think about when you're organising your international study experience, and that's of course money and how you're going to be actually carrying it whilst you're abroad. I'm actually standing in front of like one of those currency exchange booths, and you're going to see plenty of these at the airport when you arrive to fly overseas. So what do you actually need to think about? Because there are a couple of things that you need to consider before you even get to the airport in terms of how you're going to arrange your money. So let's talk about cash to start with. Now obviously when you're heading overseas, currency is different, so you're going to have to think about what kind of cash you're going to have with you when you travel abroad. So there's two things that I'd recommend here. Firstly, it's always super nice to have a little bit of foreign currency in your wallet by the time you get on the plane. And that way, you actually have no stress when you arrive in terms of finding cash machines or transacting money, and you're basically ready to go. So the easiest way to do this is essentially to go to like your bank, your local bank, and you should be able to organise that through them. You can of course do it here at the airport at places like this currency booth. But the thing is you end up paying, you don't pay commission, but they give you really crappy exchange rates. So for example, if the Australian dollar today is at like 74 cents, so one Australian dollar will buy me 74 cents, these guys behind me will give me like 70 cents. So that difference, that sort of 4 or 5% difference is essentially how these kind of companies make their money. So if you actually organise your foreign currency in advance through, for example, your bank, you'll usually get a better exchange rate than like here at the airport or at the other end. Now, my personal favourite when it comes to taking cash is actually to take care of it when you arrive overseas. So what that means is, you've got ATMs here at Sydney Airport, and likewise at every major airport around the world, you'll also find your ATM machine. And what you can do is just use your regular ATM card, your debit card, to withdraw some foreign currency when you first arrive. Now, there's a couple of things to bear in mind with this. Before you leave Australia, make sure you check in with your bank to find out how much they're actually going to charge you in terms of withdrawing money overseas. So in my case, my bank here in Australia, the Bendigo Bank, will charge me $5 Australian every time I use my debit card overseas to withdraw cash. Now, $5 isn't too bad, as long as I'm withdrawing enough money. So for me, that means if I'm going to be withdrawing cash overseas, I've got to be withdrawing at least a few $100s to justify that $5 charge. So that's what my bank charges me. The other thing that you'll pay when you withdraw cash from an ATM overseas is you'll pay usually like a $2 or $3 charge, maybe more depending on your card and depending on the country, to the bank that owns that ATM overseas. So straight away it's starting to get a little bit expensive in terms of actually withdrawing cash from that machine. But it's super convenient, and the biggest advantage of withdrawing cash from an ATM overseas is that you get the best possible exchange rate. So here at this little exchange booth, if the Australian dollar is at 74 US cents, these guys might give me like 70 cents for every one Australian dollar. But when I withdraw from an ATM overseas, they might give me a better rate, like something like 73. So you end up getting more money for the Australian dollars that you're withdrawing overseas. So that's why I'm a massive fan of just withdrawing cash from the ATM. Just make sure you do your research in advance, find out how much your bank is going to be charging you, and do a little bit of an estimate of how much money you actually want to have in cash. Now, there's a rule when you're traveling, and that is don't carry more money than you can afford to lose, because cash isn't necessarily replaceable. There are some travel insurance policies that will cover you for lost or stolen cash, but it's such a stressful thing to lose cash overseas. So for me, that sweet spot is to have somewhere around like the equivalent of about 200 or 300 Australian dollars with me. That's a good amount where I've got heaps of cash, but like if I lose that money for some reason, that's not going to be the end of my trip. And that's the most important thing always, is like if something goes wrong, it's not going to mean the end of your trip. So we've talked a little bit about cash. Now let's talk a little bit about cards. And there's been like this dramatic change in the last 10 years with the way that you can work overseas with foreign currency, or you can transact overseas with foreign currency using cards. First and foremost, if you've got like a regular Visa or MasterCard debit card or a credit card, most places around the world, unless you're kind of going deep into Africa or into parts of Asia, South America, using your cards is actually incredibly easy. I'm going to the US, I can use my debit card absolutely everywhere. Now, the absolute advantage of using my regular day-to-day debit card is that once again, my bank will charge that transaction and do the transaction, the currency conversion, at the best possible exchange rate. So that means I'm not going to be paying money to these guys to change money. So I really love using my debit card when I'm traveling overseas. Similarly with a credit card, like an Australian-based credit card, if you swipe, like to buy breakfast somewhere, buy some coffee, that will get transacted by the banks at the best possible rate. So, it's called like the interbank rate, and then interbank is like the exchange rates that banks charge each other. So that's a really handy thing to look up. And that's actually important to know, because when you go Googling for like the current exchange rate, normally the first rate that gets pulled up is the interbank rate. Now, the interbank rate is not reality for you and me. Here, you'll be paying like interbank rate plus like a 4% difference. On your credit card, it's like interbank plus 2%. So it saves you money if you're using credit and debit cards overseas in terms of the transaction value. So you can use your debit card and credit card directly overseas, highly recommended. The other option is that you load up what's called a travel card. Now, travel cards are a relatively new invention. They were invented back something around like 2010 or so. They started to appear, and now they flourished and you can get them everywhere. Travel cards you can organise through your bank, through your travel agent, even like the airlines now do their own travel cards. And essentially what they allow you to do is to preload your Australian dollars into foreign currency on like a Visa or MasterCard, just like a regular debit card. So you've actually got a debit card, but it's already got foreign currency loaded onto it. Now, this is super convenient because it means it's much easier for you to know how much you're spending. You don't have to process any kind of currency conversions on the fly. The only disadvantage with the travel cards is that you do pay like commission when you're loading up those cards. Even though they won't tell you that it's a commission, it might be called something else. One like this place here, it might be like just a really crappy exchange rate, and that's how they make their money. But of course, you're transacting with a company, you're putting money from Australian dollars into foreign currency. There is going to be some kind of fee involved. That's normal. The travel cards vary a ton in terms of what those transaction fees are. So what you do need to do is make sure that you're not paying an absolutely ridiculous amount in terms of those fees. Look into it. There are literally tons of those travel cards available out there. I would highly recommend that you look at choice.com.au, who's a consumer group. They regularly will go and test the value of all of these travel cards. We'll actually review them and tell you what those fees are and how much it's likely to cost you. So check that out. So that's the thing. When you're traveling overseas, you always want to carry your money in different forms. You want to have some cash. You want to have maybe a travel card as like a backup plan with foreign currency loaded on it. And you also want to have like your regular credit card or debit card. These are all the different ways that you can do it. And the main thing is just look into that in advance, because it's always good for you to know how much you're likely to be in for. Anyway, that's it. I'm Rob from the Global Society. I'm about to head past the big departure sign, heading for the USA, and I hope that you have a very successful international study experience wherever you are. Take care. I'm off.